Hours after a call with European leaders, U.S. President Donald Trump shed light on next course of action on Ukraine, speaking at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. Trump said he's going to talk with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky after his meeting with Putin that is slated to take place in Alaska on the 15th of August.
It was always going to be I was going to meet with President Putin, and then after that I'm going to call the leaders and President Zelensky. I'm going to call President Zelensky, and then I'll call, probably in that order, the leaders. There's a very good chance that we're going to have a second meeting, which will be more productive than the first, because the first is I'm going to find out where we are and what we're doing.
Donald Trump made it clear that he does not expect a significant outcome from the first meeting. He said the first meeting will set the tone and the significant outcome can be expected in the second meeting. That will probably involve himself, Ukrainian President Zelensky and Russian President Putin. He also made it clear that the second meeting will not take place if the first does not go well.
If the first one goes okay, we'll have a quick second one. I would like to do it almost immediately, and we'll have a quick second meeting between President Putin and President Zelensky and myself, if they'd like to have me there. And that would be a meeting where maybe it could be absolutely work. But the first meeting will not work that out. Certain great things can be gained in the first. It's going to be a very important meeting. But it's setting the table for the second meeting. I think the second meeting, if the second meeting takes place, now there may be no second meeting, because if I feel that it's not appropriate to have it because I didn't get the answers that we have to have, then we're not going to have a second meeting.
Europe has raised concerns on Ukraine's territorial integrity being compromised in a bid to strike a peace deal. Trump had earlier said that both Russia and Ukraine will have to swap some of the land they currently hold to make the ceasefire agreement happen. However, Russian officials have dismissed this as a possibility. Russia has called Europe's diplomatic stance and involvement on Ukraine's behalf as, quote, insignificant. Russia's foreign ministry official accused the European Union of, quote, sabotaging US-Russia joint efforts in ending the war, and say that Moscow's stance on ending the war remains unchanged. Let's now talk to our correspondent Susan Tehrani, who's now joining us live from New York. Susan, good to see you. We do understand that President Trump did speak to some European leaders and also Zelensky. Do we know what they discussed?
Right. Well, the president said that the call was very positive. He called it a 10 out of 10. That's coming from U.S. President Donald Trump. According to Emmanuel Macron, the French president, he was on the call as well. Before President Trump spoke at the Kennedy Center, Macron said that the call was positive. He also alluded to a possible second meeting after the Trump-Putin meeting. And he basically said that, President Trump wasn't going to be involved in that meeting. It's going to be, in one room, the Russian president and the Ukrainian president. So there's, some differences in the details that Macron and President Trump are saying. President Trump said, I may be, I may not be. So we really don't have a better understanding on what was discussed, but we do know that a lot of it had to do with really the hours and days after this meeting between President Trump and Vladimir Putin and what comes next.
Well, Susan, according to the President of the United States, Donald Trump, he says that let's not have too much hope on the first meeting. We may have a second meeting. We may have a third meeting. What are Americans saying about this meeting between Trump and Putin?
Yeah, I think Americans are clear-eyed on, what the limits of what this meeting can achieve. He's been pretty straightforward with the world and the Americans. He's saying that he's going in there to try to gauge whether or not Putin is serious about a ceasefire, or whether or not it's going to be, more of the same, where a meeting where a discussion happens and then sanctions are postponed or partially implemented, and then Putin continues with the war machine, and then this just goes into a vicious cycle. So Americans understand that. President Trump has made that very clear. But it's also very important to note that America also has a lot at stake during this meeting. Maybe not as much as Russia, but the United States is going to be talking about trade, sanctions, and tariffs with Russia as well, and the future of bilateral relations between the two countries. So that'll be an interesting aspect. And I think a lot of this meeting between the two sides are, of course, going to be about seizing the war somehow in Ukraine, but also moving forward economically and how, relations between the two sides are going to move forward, and also third-party countries that are involved in trade with Russia.
Mm-hmm. We are counting hours to this much anticipated meeting between President Trump and President Putin. Let's see how that pans out. I've been talking to our correspondent Susan Teherani. Susan, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you.